Imagine standing on a cold hill in northern Europe. Before you stretches an army unlike anything Rome has ever faced, hundreds of thousands of fierce Gallic warriors. Their battle cries shake the earth, while thousands of shields glitter beneath a gray sky. Any sane commander would retreat, but Julius Caesar doesn't. Instead, he smiles. Because today isn't just another battle. Today will decide whether Caesar becomes Rome's greatest general, or dies forgotten in a foreign land. This is the incredible story of Caesar's greatest victory, the Battle of Alesia. In our last episode, we followed Julius Caesar from an ambitious young politician to one of Rome's most powerful men. Through clever alliances with Pompey and Crassus, Caesar secured the governorship of Gaul. Many believed he was simply leaving Rome, but Caesar had a much bigger plan. He knew that victories on the battlefield would earn him something no political speech ever could glory. The next 8 years would transform him from a politician into a legend. 58 BC. North of Italy lay an enormous region the Romans called Gaul. Today, it includes France, Belgium, Luxembourg, and parts of Switzerland and Germany. Unlike Rome, Gaul wasn't one united country. It was home to dozens of independent tribes. Some were friendly, others were bitter enemies. Many constantly fought one another over land, cattle, trade routes, and honor. To Rome, Gaul represented both danger and opportunity. If hostile tribes united, they could invade Italy. If conquered, Gaul would provide enormous wealth, fertile farmland, valuable trade routes, and countless slaves. Caesar understood this better than anyone. Officially, he claimed he was defending Rome. Unofficially, he was building an empire for himself. Caesar didn't waste time. Soon after arriving, news reached him that the Helvetii tribe was migrating west with nearly their entire population. Nearly 300,000 people, warriors, families, wagons, livestock. Rome feared they would destabilize the region. Caesar saw the perfect opportunity. He quickly destroyed bridges across the Rhine River, blocking their advance. When negotiations failed, war began. Roman discipline proved stronger than Gallic courage. After months of fighting, the Helvetii were defeated and forced to return home. Rome celebrated. Caesar gained his first major victory. But this was only the beginning. Most Roman commanders fought battles. Caesar fought campaigns. He moved his legions faster than anyone believed possible. His soldiers could march nearly 30 kilometers in a single day, then build an entire fortified camp before sunset. Every night, no exceptions, Roman camps weren't simple tents. They were miniature fortresses, each one surrounded by trenches, walls, wooden stakes, and guarded entrances. Even after exhausting marches, soldiers spent hours digging. Many complained, but Caesar never asked his men to do anything he wouldn't do himself. He marched beside them, shared their hardships, ate the same food, faced the same dangers. Slowly, the soldiers stopped seeing him as merely their commander. They began seeing him as one of them. That loyalty would soon change history. Over the next several years, Caesar defeated tribe after tribe. The Belgae, the Nervii, the Veneti, the Aquitani. Each victory expanded Roman control. Some tribes surrendered peacefully, others fought to the bitter end. The Nervii nearly destroyed Caesar's army in one surprise attack. Roman lines collapsed. Legionaries panicked. For a moment, defeat seemed certain. Then Caesar did something extraordinary. He grabbed a shield from a nearby soldier, ran directly to the front line, and personally rallied his troops. Seeing their commander fighting beside them inspired the exhausted Romans. The army regrouped. The Nervii were crushed. Stories of Caesar's courage spread across Gaul. Soon, even his enemies feared him. Caesar believed engineering could win wars as effectively as swords. Whenever rivers blocked his advance, he built bridges. Whenever mountains slowed him, he found new roads. Whenever cities resisted, he surrounded them with walls. One of his greatest engineering achievements came in 55 BC. The Rhine River marked the border between Gaul and the Germanic tribes. Most commanders would have crossed using boats. Caesar refused. He wanted to send a message. In only 10 days, Roman engineers built a massive wooden bridge across one of Europe's strongest rivers. The German tribes were stunned. The impossible had become reality. Caesar marched across, demonstrated Roman power, then dismantled the bridge before returning. He hadn't crossed because he needed to. He crossed because he could, and because everyone needed to know it. After securing much of Gaul, Caesar turned his attention somewhere no Roman general had successfully invaded before. Across the cold, stormy waters of the English Channel lay a mysterious island the Romans called Britannia. To many Romans, Britain was the edge of the known world. Stories described it as a land wrapped in fog, filled with painted warriors, strange customs, and dangerous tribes. Some believed it was rich in valuable metals, while others thought it was simply too wild to conquer. Caesar saw something different. He saw another opportunity to increase his fame. In 55 BC, he assembled a fleet and crossed the sea with 2 legions. The voyage itself was difficult. High waves tossed Roman ships, and unfamiliar tides confused even experienced sailors. When they finally reached Britain, Roman soldiers faced another unexpected problem. The British warriors refused to meet them on land. Instead, they waded in shallow water, attacking from horseback and chariots while Roman soldiers struggled to climb off their ships wearing heavy armor. The landing nearly became a disaster. Only after fierce fighting did the Romans establish a beachhead. Caesar's first expedition was brief. Storms damaged many of his ships, supplies became limited, and the Romans eventually returned to Gaul. Some critics called it a failure. Caesar called it reconnaissance. The following year, he returned with nearly 5 times the force. This time, British tribes were driven back, several kings accepted Roman authority, and Caesar returned to Gaul claiming another remarkable achievement. Although Britain would not become a permanent Roman province for almost a century, Caesar had accomplished something extraordinary. He had become the first Roman commander to successfully invade the island. His reputation grew even larger. Back in Rome, people celebrated his victories, but beneath the celebrations, something dangerous was beginning to happen. The the growing fear in Rome. Every victory made Caesar stronger. Every campaign brought more gold, more prisoners, more loyal soldiers, more political influence. The wealth flowing from Gaul was unimaginable. Entire towns surrendered their treasures. Trade routes filled Roman coffers. Thousands of slaves were sold throughout Italy. Caesar carefully shared this wealth with his soldiers. Unlike many commanders, he rewarded bravery generously. Every successful campaign meant larger bonuses, better equipment, greater respect. His legions became fiercely loyal not just to Rome, but to Caesar himself. This worried many senators. In the Roman Republic, armies were supposed to serve the state, not individual men. One senator quietly admitted, "Caesar no longer commands an army, the army belongs to Caesar." His greatest political ally, Crassus, had already died during a disastrous campaign against Parthia. Now the alliance known as the First Triumvirate was collapsing. Pompey, once Caesar's friend, began moving closer to the Senate. Old friendship slowly turned into political rivalry. Neither side realized how close Rome was to civil war. The fire of rebellion. For years, the tribes of Gaul had fought separately. Whenever Caesar defeated one tribe, another remained neutral. That division had allowed Rome to conquer them one by one. Then, in 52 BC, everything changed. A young Gallic noble named Vercingetorix emerged. Unlike previous leaders, he understood Rome's greatest strength. It wasn't superior weapons. It wasn't better armor. It was unity and discipline. To defeat Caesar, the tribes had to become one nation. Traveling from village to village, Vercingetorix delivered passionate speeches. He reminded people of burned homes, destroyed families, captured relatives. He declared that if the tribes continued fighting each other, they would all become slaves. His words spread like wildfire. One by one, rival tribes forgot their ancient feuds. For the first time in history, much of Gaul united under a single leader. This was exactly what Rome had always feared. Vercingetorix wasn't simply brave, he was intelligent. He knew fighting Caesar in open battle was dangerous. Instead, he adopted a new strategy: destroy everything the Romans needed. Villages were burned before Roman armies could capture them. Food stores were emptied, bridges were destroyed, fields were set on fire. If Caesar wanted supplies, there would be none. The Romans suddenly found themselves marching through empty lands. Their enemies stayed just out of reach. Every mile became harder. Every day, food became scarcer. Some Roman officers urged Caesar to retreat, but retreat was not part of Caesar's character. One city changed everything. Its name was Avaricum. Unlike other Gallic towns, its people refused Vercingetorix's order to destroy it. They believed its strong walls and surrounding marshes made it impossible to capture. Reluctantly, Vercingetorix allowed them to defend it. Caesar immediately surrounded the city. Rain poured constantly. Mud slowed every movement. Roman soldiers worked day and night building enormous siege ramps taller than the city walls. The defenders mocked them. They laughed from the walls, believing the Romans would never finish. But Caesar's engineers never stopped. After nearly a month of relentless work, the massive siege towers finally reached the walls. Then came the assault. Roman legionaries stormed into the city from multiple directions. Street fighting lasted for hours. By the end of the battle, Avaricum had fallen. The victory gave Caesar desperately needed food and supplies, but the war was far from over. Vercingetorix still commanded the largest army Gaul had ever assembled, and he had one final plan. Realizing that another open campaign might eventually favor Rome, Vercingetorix withdrew to the hilltop fortress of Alesia. The location seemed perfect. Steep hills protected every approach. Rivers surrounded much of the area. Strong defensive walls crowned the heights. Thousands of Gallic warriors gathered inside. Food had been stockpiled. The defenders believed they could outlast any siege. Even better, Vercingetorix had already sent riders across Gaul. Their mission was simple: raise every warrior still able to fight. Soon, a massive relief army would march to rescue Alesia. Caesar understood the danger immediately. If he attacked the fortress directly, he would suffer enormous casualties. If he waited too long, he would be trapped between the defenders inside the city and the relief army outside. He faced one of the most impossible military situations of his entire career. Many generals would have withdrawn. Caesar chose something no one expected. He decided to trap an entire nation. Standing before the towering fortress of Alesia, Julius Caesar studied the battlefield in silence. Inside the city waited nearly 80,000 Gallic warriors under Vercingetorix. Outside, somewhere across Gaul, an enormous relief army was gathering. Time was against Rome. If Caesar attacked the walls, thousands of his men would die. If he retreated, years of conquest would be lost. Then Caesar proposed an idea so unbelievable that even some of his own officers questioned it. He wouldn't storm Alesia, he would imprison it. Caesar ordered every legionary to put down his sword and pick up a shovel. Thousands of soldiers immediately began digging. Day after day, week after week, the Romans constructed a massive ring of fortifications completely surrounding Alesia. This wasn't a simple fence. It stretched nearly 16 kilometers around the city. Deep trenches were dug first. Behind them rose enormous earth walls reinforced with timber. Watchtowers stood at regular intervals. Catapults and ballistae were placed along the defenses. Every entrance was protected. Every approach was covered. No one could escape. Inside Alesia, the Gauls watched in disbelief. The Romans weren't attacking. They were building a prison. Caesar knew the defenders would eventually attempt a breakout, so he transformed the land into a deadly maze. Rows of sharpened wooden stakes were hidden beneath the soil. Deep pits lined with pointed stakes were carefully camouflaged. Iron hooks and concealed spikes waited beneath leaves and grass. Roman soldiers even gave these traps names. Some resembled blooming flowers. Others looked harmless until a soldier stepped onto them. An enemy charging through the fields would suddenly disappear into hidden pits or become trapped on sharpened stakes before ever reaching the Roman walls. It was one of the most sophisticated defensive systems ever built in the ancient world. Every meter of ground became a weapon. Then the new Caesar had feared finally arrived. Scouts raced into the Roman camp. The Gallic relief army had been spotted, and it wasn't small. Ancient sources claim the force numbered over 200,000 warriors. Modern historians believe the real number was likely much lower, perhaps 50,000 to 100,000, but it was still enormous. Either way, Caesar faced a terrifying reality. He was now trapped between two enemy armies. Most commanders would have panicked. Caesar did the opposite. He gave another unbelievable order: build a second wall. Roman engineers immediately began digging again. This second line of fortifications faced outward toward the approaching relief army. Now Caesar's army stood between two gigantic walls, one facing inward, one facing outward. The Romans had essentially built a fortress inside another fortress. If the army inside Alesia attacked, the inner wall would stop them. If the relief force attacked, the outer wall would hold. The entire Roman army now occupied the narrow strip between the two defensive lines. It was one of the boldest military engineering projects ever attempted. Everything depended on Roman discipline. If either wall collapsed, the Roman army would be surrounded and destroyed. As the days passed, food inside Alesia began to disappear. Supplies ran dangerously low. Horses were slaughtered. Grain was rationed. Families struggled to survive. Finally, Vercingetorix made a heartbreaking decision. The elderly, women, and children were ordered to leave the city. Perhaps Caesar would allow them to pass through his lines. Perhaps they would find safety elsewhere. Instead, Caesar refused. He would not open the gates, nor would he provide food. The civilians became trapped between the Roman walls and the city they had just left. Neither side could help them. For days they remained in no man's land, suffering from hunger and exhaustion. It was one of the darkest moments of the campaign. Ancient warfare was often brutal beyond imagination. Soon the relief army finally arrived. From the surrounding hills, countless Gallic warriors looked down upon the Roman fortifications. Signal horns echoed across the valleys. For the first time, both Gallic armies could see one another. Inside Alesia, cheers erupted. Hope returned. The plan was simple. The relief army would attack from outside. At the same time, Vercingetorix would launch a massive assault from within. The Romans would be crushed between them. The attack began at dawn. Thousands of warriors rushed toward the Roman outer walls. Arrows darkened the sky. Sling stones hammered the defenders. Battle cries echoed across the countryside. At the very same moment, warriors inside Alesia charged the inner defenses. For hours, the Romans fought on two fronts simultaneously. Every tower became a battlefield. Every trench filled with desperate fighting. Yet the fortifications held. By sunset, both Gallic attacks had failed, but everyone knew the next assault would be even larger. That night, Gallic commanders searched for weakness. Eventually, scouts discovered a section of Roman defenses built on uneven ground. The hills there made the walls slightly lower. It was the perfect place to attack. Before sunrise, tens of thousands of Gallic warriors silently gathered. Inside Alesia, Vercingetorix prepared his own soldiers. This would be the decisive battle. If they broke through even once, Caesar's army would cease to exist. The fate of Gaul, the future of Rome, and Julius Caesar's destiny would all be decided in the next few hours. The last battle. Before dawn, an eerie silence settled over the hills surrounding Alesia. Roman soldiers stood on the walls, gripping their shields tightly. They knew what was coming. Some had fought beside Caesar for nearly 8 years. They had crossed frozen rivers, marched through endless forests, defeated countless tribes. But today felt different. Today, Rome itself seemed to hang in the balance. Then, as the first rays of sunlight appeared over the horizon, the silence was shattered. Thousands of Gallic war horns echoed across the valley. The final assault had begun. The storm begins. From outside the Roman walls, wave after wave of Gallic warriors charged downhill. Some carried ladders, others dragged bundles of branches to fill the Roman trenches. Archers and slingers unleashed a rain of arrows and stones. At the exact same moment, Vercingetorix ordered every available warrior inside Alesia to attack. The Roman army was now fighting on two fronts at once. Every section of the fortifications came under attack. The earth shook beneath thousands of running feet. Dust filled the air. Battle cries echoed across the battlefield. The carefully built Roman defenses slowed the attackers, but they couldn't stop everyone. In several places, Gallic warriors reached the walls. Hand-to-hand combat erupted. Spears splintered. Swords clashed. Shields cracked beneath heavy blows. For hours, neither side gave ground. Caesar leads from the front. As reports arrived from every direction, Caesar realized one section of the outer wall was beginning to collapse. The Gallic relief army had concentrated tens of thousands of warriors against the weakest point. Roman defenders were being pushed back. Some officers urged Caesar to withdraw his reserves and prepare for retreat. Instead, Caesar mounted his horse. Wearing his famous bright red commander's cloak, he rode directly toward the most dangerous fighting. Roman soldiers immediately recognized him. A cheer spread through the ranks. Their commander had come. Caesar personally directed reinforcements where they were needed most. He encouraged exhausted legionaries. He reorganized broken formations. His calm presence transformed panic into determination. The men who had followed him across Gaul refused to fail while he stood beside them. Labienus' desperate defense. One of Caesar's most trusted generals, Titus Labienus, commanded the threatened section of the wall. He quickly sent a desperate message. If reinforcements do not arrive immediately, the line cannot hold. Caesar understood the danger. If that single position fell, the Gallic armies inside and outside would unite. The Roman army would be trapped. Everything depended on the next decision. Gathering his remaining cavalry and elite infantry, Caesar launched a bold counterattack. Rather than waiting behind the walls, he rode out to meet the enemy. It was an enormous risk, but it completely surprised the Gallic warriors. The cavalry charge. Roman cavalry swept around the enemy's flank. At the same time, German cavalry fighting alongside Caesar attacked from another direction. Caught between disciplined Roman infantry and fast-moving cavalry, the Gallic relief force began losing its formation. Then Caesar ordered the full attack. Roman reserves surged forward. Legionaries charged with renewed confidence. The enemy lines began to buckle. Soon, they broke. Thousands of Gallic warriors turned and ran. What had started as an organized assault quickly became a chaotic retreat. Panic spread across the battlefield. Seeing the relief army fleeing, the warriors inside Alesia lost hope. Their final chance had disappeared. Vercingetorix makes his choice. The next morning, silence returned. No relief army remained outside the walls. Inside Alesia, food was gone. Supplies were exhausted. The warriors knew the war was over. Vercingetorix gathered the tribal leaders. According to ancient accounts, he told them there were only two honorable choices: fight until everyone died, or surrender to save the remaining people. The chiefs agreed. Vercingetorix chose to surrender himself. One of history's most famous scenes followed. Mounted on his magnificent horse, dressed in his finest armor, the Gallic leader rode slowly out of the city gates. Roman soldiers watched in complete silence. He approached Caesar. Without speaking, he dismounted, removed his weapons, laid them at Caesar's feet, then sat quietly, accepting his fate. The greatest resistance Rome had ever faced in Gaul had ended. The victory that changed history. The Battle of Alesia became one of the greatest military victories in history. Gaul was effectively conquered. Roman control over Western Europe was secured for centuries. Caesar returned with unimaginable wealth, unmatched prestige, and an army completely loyal to him. Across Rome, people celebrated. His military genius seemed beyond question. Yet while the people cheered, many senators grew increasingly afraid. How could the Republic control a man whose soldiers would follow him anywhere? How could politicians compete with a commander who had conquered an entire nation? The answer: they couldn't. The price of greatness. Although Caesar had won his greatest battle, victory created a new problem. His enemies in Rome no longer saw him as a successful general. They saw him as a threat to the Republic itself. His old ally Pompey had become his political rival. The Senate demanded that Caesar surrender his command and return to Rome as an ordinary citizen. Caesar knew exactly what awaited him if he obeyed: political trials, humiliation, perhaps even exile. Everything he had built could disappear overnight. He stood at a crossroads: submit to the Senate, or challenge Rome itself. The decision he would soon make would change world history forever. Julius Caesar's victory at Alesia was more than a military triumph. It demonstrated how discipline, engineering, leadership, and strategic brilliance could overcome overwhelming odds. Many historians still study the battle as one of the greatest sieges ever fought, but Caesar's greatest enemy was no longer across the battlefield. It was waiting for him in Rome, and the next chapter would be even more dramatic than the conquest of Gaul, because the man who conquered an empire was about to march against his own country.